All right, so let's dive into Machiavelli's Art of War. I know military strategy may not sound like the most thrilling topic, but trust me, this one's full of surprises. Especially for those of you who haven't spent much time thinking about military history, there's a lot here that might change the way you see the world. That's the magic of these deep dives, isn't it? We take these complex sources and we find the hidden gems, the unexpected connections that make you go, ooh, I never thought of it that way before.
What's particularly intriguing about Machiavelli's Art of War is that while it's ostensibly about military strategy, it also offers a deep dive into the timeless issues of power and leadership and even human psychology.
And to really understand what Machiavelli's getting at, we need to go beyond the surface, right? I mean, wasn't there more to his agenda than just praising ancient military tactics?
That's a great question.
Mm.
Machiavelli was anything but a simple-minded traditionalist, and his book reflects that. To start unpacking this, it's helpful to remember that Machiavelli wasn't just an armchair philosopher. He had real-world military experience. For 14 years, he served as the Florentine secretary, deeply involved in all sorts of military affairs.
Okay, so when we talk about Machiavelli and military matters, we're not just talking theory. What kind of hands-on experience did he actually have?
He did a little bit of everything.
Well,
He observed and analyzed enemy armies, assessing their size, their weaponry morale, even their leadership. He was also instrumental in establishing Florence's first native militia in over a century. A huge undertaking for a city that had relied on mercenaries for so long.
wow, so he was really in the thick of it, and The Art of War itself was published during his lifetime, right? That tells us something about how he wanted to be seen, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He wanted to be recognized as an authority on military matters, not just a political theorist. Publishing this work while he was still actively involved in Florentine affairs was a strategic move to solidify his position and influence.
So we're talking about a guy who knew the practical realities of warfare firsthand. But he chose to present his ideas in this unusual dialogue format set against the backdrop of Renaissance Florence. I have to admit, I love the imagery. These real historical figures debating military strategy in these beautiful gardens. It's like stepping back in time. But what's the point of all this elaborate staging? Why not just write a straightforward treatise?
The dialogue format serves a few clever purposes. The main speaker, Fabrizio Colonna, was a renowned mercenary captain. He represents the traditional military mindset, the old guard. But then we have these younger characters, friends of Machiavelli, who were eager to learn from Fabrizio, but also open to new ideas, to a blend of the old and the new.
So right there, built into the structure of the book itself, we have this tension between tradition and innovation. Was this Machiavelli's way of subtly challenging the idea of blindly following the ancients?
It's exactly. Through the dialogue, he orchestrates a clash of perspectives. The younger characters constantly push Fabrizio, questioning his assumptions and forcing him to acknowledge the limitations of outdated practices. In fact, at one point, Fabrizio actually admits, if invention brings honor in other things in war, above all, it honors you.
That's quite a statement from a seasoned military leader. It seems Machiavelli is not entirely against innovation after all. Was he actually embracing new military technology?
He absolutely was. The common misconception that Machiavelli rejected all things modern just doesn't hold up. He understood that clinging to outdated methods could lead to defeat on the battlefield. Take early firearms and artillery, for example. Machiavelli understood both their power and their limitations. He saw how they could change the course of a battle, but also recognized they weren't some magical solution.
So it wasn't a matter of choosing one or the other. He advocated for a combined approach.
Exactly. He wanted to blend the best of ancient and modern weaponry, creating a truly effective fighting force that could adapt to the changing realities of warfare. In fact, there's evidence he even invented some military innovations that were later attributed to Alexander the Great.
Wow, now that's a surprising twist. It seems like Machiavelli was much more forward-thinking than people give him credit for. And here's something that struck me as incredibly relevant even for us today. This tension between political leaders and powerful military figures, it's something we grapple with, isn't it?
It's a perennial problem, and Machiavelli tackles it head-on in Art of War, though, with a subtle hand. Take the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus. He seized power through the military, and Machiavelli condemns him as a criminal in his other writings.
But in Art of War, his portrayal is more neutral. Almost like Machiavelli admires Severus's effectiveness despite the morally questionable aspects.
Precisely. He recognized that a strong professional military could be a potent force, even if the means of achieving that strength were morally ambiguous. It highlights Machiavelli's understanding of the complex relationship between power, morality, and leadership.
He's walking a tightrope, acknowledging the sometimes brutal realities of power without explicitly endorsing them. So Machiavelli understood the need for innovation and the challenges of controlling military power. But what about the soldiers themselves? What kind of army was he actually envisioning?
Well, one thing that really stands out is his emphasis on obedience, both in common soldiers and their commanders. It wasn't enough for soldiers to be courageous or patriotic. Machiavelli believed in a system, a culture of order and discipline that kept everyone in line.
He wasn't just relying on individual bravery. He wanted a well-oiled machine, right? A force that was trained to follow orders without question.
Right, and he had some fascinating ideas about how to achieve that level of obedience. For example, he believed in using music to influence soldiers' moods.
Music. On the battlefield. That's unexpected.
Yeah.
What kind of music are we talking about here? What would Machiavelli's military playlist sound like?
It's a fascinating detail, and it highlights his awareness of the psychological dimensions of warfare. He believes certain types of music could inspire courage, instill discipline, or even calm anxieties.
That's a powerful insight, and it makes you think, how could we apply that kind of understanding to modern leadership? It's not just about giving orders, it's about creating the right environment, the right mindset for success.
Exactly. Whether you're leading a team in a boardroom or on a battlefield, understanding the psychological factors at play can make all the difference.
Okay, so we've got obedience covered, but there's another idea that caught my attention. Machiavelli talks about shaping public opinion, particularly in relation to how you address the multitude versus a select few. What was he getting at there?
That passage reveals Machiavelli's understanding of the importance of controlling the narrative, shaping public perception for the common good. He understood that for a military to be truly effective, it needed the support of the people.
So it's not just about controlling the soldiers, it's about controlling the story, the public's understanding of why military service is necessary, even honorable. And that ties directly to the book itself, doesn't it? Maybe by writing Art of War, Machiavelli was subtly shaping public opinion about military service?
It's a brilliant observation. He is suggesting that achieving the ideal army goes beyond just training soldiers. It requires shaping the public's perception of military service itself. And it makes you wonder.
If he had the opportunity, if Machiavelli himself was in charge, would he have been able to implement all these ideas and build that perfect army?
That's the big question, isn't it? Throughout the book, Fabrizio keeps talking about waiting for the right opportunity to put his ideas into action. Makes you wonder if those words also reflect Machiavelli's own ambitions.
It's like we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain, a hint of Machiavelli's own longing for a chance to lead, to put his theories into practice on a grander scale.
It's a question that takes us to the core of who Machiavelli was, a man driven by ideas but also deeply pragmatic. And speaking of pragmatism, we can't overlook his attention to the practicalities of building an army. He even had opinions on the ideal physical attributes of a soldier.
Oh, this I have to hear. Was he picturing an army of super soldiers?
Not exactly super soldiers in the modern sense, but he definitely had specific criteria in mind. He emphasized agility, strength, and stamina traits essential for enduring the hardships of war. He even went so far as to outline the ideal physique, strong limbs, a lean build, observant eyes. He was very detail-oriented.
It's as if he was designing the ultimate warrior prototype. But it wasn't just about physical strength, was it? There had to be a moral dimension as well.
Absolutely. Machiavelli understood that physical prowess alone wouldn't guarantee victory. He emphasized character traits as well: honesty, a sense of shame, and a willingness to obey orders. An army without discipline, even if physically strong, would crumble from within.
He's striking that balance again, strength and virtue. But how did these ideas measure up against the realities of his time? I mean, the Renaissance wasn't exactly known for its citizen armies.
That's a great point. The reality was that most cities, including Florence, relied heavily on mercenaries, soldiers for hire, who weren't necessarily loyal to the cause they were fighting for. This was a major point of contention for Machiavelli. He believed passionately in the superiority of citizen armies.
Makes sense. A mercenary might fight for money, but a citizen soldier is fighting for their home, their family, their way of life. That's got to be a much stronger motivator.
Exactly. And this ties directly back to his belief in shaping public opinion. If you can instill a sense of civic duty, a belief in the importance of defending your own city-state, you'll have a much stronger foundation for a military.
But even with that foundation, even with committed citizen soldiers, you still need training, right? You can't just throw a bunch of enthusiastic amateurs onto the battlefield and expect them to win.
Of course not. Machiavelli was a big believer in structure and discipline. He advocated for a clear chain of command with capable officers leading the troops, and he stressed the importance of drilling, practicing maneuvers, and instilling a sense of obedience through constant training.
So he wanted to combine the passion of a citizen army with the precision and discipline of a professional force. He was looking for the best of both worlds.
Precisely. And this is where his admiration for the Roman army comes in. He saw them as the gold standard, a highly efficient, incredibly disciplined force that was able to conquer vast territories and maintain order for centuries.
It sounds like his vision was this unique blend of ancient inspiration and modern pragmatism. But what about the actual tools of war? How did he view the weapons and tactics of his day?
Well, he was writing at a time of significant technological advancement. Firearms were becoming increasingly common on the battlefield, and that had a huge impact on military strategy.
It's like the rules of the game were changing. You couldn't just rely on the old ways when you've got cannons and muskets flying around.
Exactly.
And Machiavelli recognized that. He understood the need to adapt and incorporate these new technologies. But unlike some who saw firearms as the future and nothing else, he didn't advocate for complete abandonment of traditional weapons.
So he wasn't a purist clinging to the past, nor was he wholeheartedly embracing every shiny new weapon that came along.
He was much more nuanced than that. He believed in a combined arms approach, blending the old and the new for maximum effectiveness. In Art of War, he lays out detailed battle formations that incorporate swords and pikes alongside firearms and artillery.
It's like he's creating this hybrid army, drawing on the strengths of both tradition and innovation. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But didn't he get really specific about how these units would actually function on the battlefield?
He absolutely did. His battle formations were incredibly intricate. For example, he describes a system of interlocking units with pikemen forming a defensive line swordsman engaging in close combat, and archers and handgunners providing range support.
It sounds like a deadly, well-choreographed dance. Every unit with a specific role to play, all working together in this grand strategic ballet. And the key was flexibility. The whole formation was designed to be adaptable, capable of withstanding enemy attacks and launching swift offensives. And a crucial element of this flexibility was his emphasis on reserve troops.
So he wasn't just sending everyone into battle at once. He kept some units back, ready to deploy them strategically as the situation demanded.
Exactly. Battles are unpredictable. You need to be able to adapt to changing circumstances, exploit weaknesses in the enemy lines, and reinforce your own troops when necessary. And Machiavelli understood that.
It's like he's playing 4D chess out there on the battlefield.
Hmm.
And speaking of strategic maneuvering, what about his views on siege warfare? I imagine that was a big part of military strategy in his day.
Sieges were a brutal reality of warfare at the time, these long, drawn-out affairs often ending in bloodshed. And Machiavelli had a lot to say about them. He outlined a variety of tactics, from cutting off the supply lines and bombarding the city with artillery to digging tunnels and launching surprise attacks.
It's like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with entire cities as the playing field.
He wasn't afraid to get creative. He even advocated for psychological warfare tactics, spreading rumors, sowing discord among the defenders, using deception to demoralize the enemy. It was about attacking on multiple fronts, not just physically, but mentally.
But even with all these aggressive tactics, he wasn't just advocating for brute force, was he?
Not at all. He recognized the limitations of sieges. They were costly, they were time-consuming, and they often resulted in heavy casualties. He advised caution, urging leaders to carefully weigh the potential costs and benefits.
It was about choosing your battles, knowing when a siege was worth the risk and when it was better to cut your losses. It seems like even in the midst of all this talk of war and strategy, there was a certain pragmatism, a sense of realism to his thinking.
There was. He knew that you can't win every battle, and sometimes the most strategic move is to regroup and live to fight another day. But he also understood that even in retreat, you have to maintain discipline and order.
It's not just about running away. You have to control the retreat, minimize your losses, and maintain the cohesion of your forces.
Right, and he was very specific about the importance of fortifications, strong walls, deep ditches, even elaborate systems of tunnels and traps. He saw a well-fortified city as a key element in any defensive strategy.
It makes you wonder if he ever imagined how those ideas would evolve in the centuries to come. From medieval castles to modern bunkers, the concept of fortification has certainly stood the test of time. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from recruitment and training to tactics and sieges. It seems like Machiavelli's Art of War really does cover every aspect of building and leading an army. But what about the leader himself? What qualities did he think were essential for success on the battlefield?
Leadership for Machiavelli was absolutely paramount. It was the heart of everything he wrote about in Art of War. And his views on this, as you might expect, are both fascinating and sometimes controversial.
But considering who we're talking about, I'd be disappointed if they weren't at least a little bit controversial.
The first thing to understand is that Machiavelli believes a leader must be both strong and cunning. He needs to inspire his troops, but also make tough, sometimes ruthless decisions.
So we're not talking about a leader who seeks to be everyone's friend. Machiavelli's ideal leader commands respect, even fear.
Exactly. He understood the importance of establishing authority. And this leads us to one of his most famous and most misunderstood principles. The ends justify the means.
That's the phrase that's been debated for centuries. How does it actually play out in the context of military leadership?
In the context of art of war, it means a leader must be willing to do whatever it takes to achieve victory. He can't be bound by conventional morality. If a certain action, even a morally questionable one, will lead to success, then it's justified.
So it's about pragmatism over idealism, making the tough choices, even if they're not popular or easy. And that makes me think of another aspect of his philosophy that we've touched on, this emphasis on deception.
Deception for Machiavelli was another tool in the leader's arsenal. He believed a leader must be skilled in the art of outsmarting his opponents, keeping them off balance.
So it's about mind games, psychological warfare, creating diversion, spreading disinformation, anything to gain an advantage.
He was a proponent of all of that. Spreading false rumors, feigning weakness to lure the enemy into a trap. He saw these tactics as legitimate, even necessary. But here's the key. He wasn't advocating for dishonesty for its own sake. Deception was a tool to be used strategically for a larger purpose.
It's about winning the war, not just winning every battle. And this brings us back to that tension between power and morality. If a leader is willing to do whatever it takes to win, how do you prevent that kind of power from corrupting?
That's the question that continues to haunt us, isn't it? Machiavelli recognized the danger. He understood that a leader who becomes hated by his people is doomed to fail.
So there's a balance to be struck, being feared but not hated, respected but not necessarily loved. It's a delicate dance.
And finally, Machiavelli believed that a leader must be constantly learning, adapting to changing circumstances. Complacency is the enemy of success.
That's a powerful insight. It applies not just to military leaders, but to anyone in a position of authority.
Absolutely. Business leaders, politicians, even parents. We can all learn from Machiavelli's emphasis on flexibility and continuous learning.
So we've explored his views on leadership, this blend of strength, cunning, pragmatism, and even deception. But there's one aspect we haven't touched on yet that might surprise some listeners, his thoughts on the role of religion in the military.
Ah, yes. This is where we see a different side of Machiavelli, a side that acknowledges the power of faith. He understood that religion, despite his reputation for cold pragmatism, could be a powerful unifying force.
So it's not about personal piety or religious devotion. It's about harnessing the power of belief as a tool for inspiring and controlling troops.
Exactly. He saw religion as a way to instill a sense of shared purpose, to motivate soldiers to fight for something larger than themselves.
He's tapping into that primal need to believe, to feel like you're fighting on the side of righteousness. And how did he propose to actually put this into practice?
He advocated for specific rituals and ceremonies designed to reinforce this sense of religious fervor. Public displays of faith, collective prayer, even battlefield sermons. These were all tools to create a sense of shared belief in divine mandate.
So it's not just about private prayer in the trenches. It's about creating a public spectacle, a shared experience that binds the soldiers together.
Right. Of course, Machiavelli's views on religion are complex and open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Was he truly religious, or did he just see faith as a tool to be manipulated?
That's a question that historians continue to debate. But regardless of his personal beliefs, he clearly understood the power of religion to shape human behavior, especially in the context of warfare. It seems like we keep coming back to this question of power. How to wield it effectively, how to prevent it from corrupting. And that brings us back to that tantalizing what if we were discussing earlier. What if Machiavelli had been given the chance to lead, to put all these ideas into practice on a larger scale?
It's the ultimate thought experiment, isn't it? Could he have actually created that perfect army, the one he envisioned in The Art of War, blending ancient wisdom with modern innovations? Or would the messy realities of leadership, the compromises and moral ambiguities, have tarnished his ideals?
It's a question that takes us beyond the pages of the book and into the realm of pure speculation, but I think it's worth exploring, especially considering how relevant his ideas still are today.
Absolutely. And there are no easy answers. On the one hand, Machiavelli was a brilliant strategist. He understood power dynamics, he knew how to motivate people, and he had a clear vision for what an effective military should look like.
But on the other hand, as the saying goes, power corrupts. And even the most well-intentioned leaders can be seduced by ambition and the allure of control.
That's the tension that runs through all of Machiavelli's work.
Yeah.
He recognizes the need for strong leadership, for decisive action, and even for the use of deception and force. But he's also acutely aware of the dangers of unchecked power.
So would Machiavelli, the architect of this perfect army, have been immune to the temptations that come with absolute power? Or would he become the very tyrant he warned against in his other writings?
It's a question each of us has to wrestle with as we consider the legacy of the art of war. And there's no right answer. But the very act of asking the question, of grappling with these complexities of power and leadership, speaks to the enduring power of Machiavelli's work.
I think that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. It's not just about learning facts. It's about sparking those aha moments, those questions that linger in your mind long after the conversation is over.
And those questions can lead us down new paths of exploration, pushing us to think critically about the world around us and our place in it.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for guiding us through this fascinating exploration of Machiavelli's art of war. Your insights have been incredibly illuminating.
It's been my pleasure. Machiavelli's work is endlessly fascinating, and I encourage all our listeners to delve deeper into his writings. There's always more to discover.
And remember, everyone, the deep dive doesn't end here. Take these insights, these thought-provoking questions, and apply them to your own lives, your own challenges, your own pursuit of knowledge and understanding. Until next time, keep diving deep.